we're still at Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We're still at Surah Al Nisa. And last time we really spent almost 2 hours on this ayah, right? So long 2 hours just on this ayah. But of course, it's a very important ayah because it takes a lot. It takes a lot of let's say confused dynamic, whether we're talking about the society and how they relate with the topic, in other words, theoretically, and whether we're talking about this topic in application within the Muslim community. So we talked about how it affects the society, whether to apply it and not to apply it. And we also talked about the different rights and responsibilities that many will misunderstand, and the rights and responsibilities that Islam, through the lens of the legal maxims, which is the preservation of deen, preservation of nafs, life, preservation of aql, mental health, and the preservation of chastity / family, and the preservation of wealth. So we talked a lot about some of those things, and we said that maintaining the rights for the children, or even the wives' rights, is basically the foundation before we even look at polygamy as if it's a leisure or a pleasureful thing. So in Islam, it sees it as not a pleasureful thing if done right. Now here's one thing, is that there is something called a ta'assuf fi isti'mal al-haq. What is a ta'assuf fi isti'mal al-haq? A ta'assuf fi isti'mal al-haq is basically when somebody abuses the privileges / rights that they are given, or that is given to them, and they misuse it or abuse it. All right. Now, in Islam, التعسف في استعمال الحق does not mean that we would take away that particular halal ruling or even permission. So what does that mean? If we see that, yes, it's common that people are practicing polygamy, but then we're seeing more drama, we're seeing more women being abused, more children are being neglected, etc., then that doesn't mean we would regard it as haram. No one can actually regard polygamy as haram, because to actually do ijtihad, listen to this, ladies, to do ijtihad la ijtihad fi mawrid al-nas. There is no ijtihad whenever there is a text, whether that text was obligating, permitting, or forbidding something. There is no ijtihad. What is ijtihad? Ijtihad is using an analogy, and then probably contradicting the text. And according to the person doing the ijtihad, they might actually say, well, what we're trying to do is really apply a different benefit, a different maslaha. But when we would have a text that is permitting polygamy, so here you look at فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُمْ. This فَانْكِحُوا is not making it as an order per se, an obligation, but it's actually making it that it is permissible. What's the evidence? Although the word فَانْكِحُوا is an imperative verb, usually an imperative verb actually means al-amr yufidu al-wujub. An imperative verb means that it is obligatory. But just the word saying ma taba actually leaves it as generally that it's giving the man right in the sentence that what you desire. In other words, marriage itself is not obligatory, and neither is polygamy obligatory. So when you want to take a verb, even if it's an imperative verb, you have to look at the rest of the sentence, because an imperative verb can actually be taken down from the level of making something imperative / mandatory to a level of making it either sunnah or even just making it mubah, permissible. All right. So you could see فَانكِحُوا مَا طَابَ actually makes it that it is permissible, and no law can at all come in and say, well, we're going to do ijtihad. And because many people are misusing and doing ta'assuf fi isti'mal al-haqq, and here we're going to consider polygamy as impermissible. There is no law in Islam that can actually obstruct the permissibility or even the rulings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had regarded. Okay, لا اجتهاد في مورد النص. There's no ijtihad. You can't do ijtihad and say, well, people are misunderstanding it. We're going to say, okay, well, let's work on bringing in the awareness, not stop the ruling. Let's work on bringing in the awareness, whether it's bringing awareness to the women or whether it's bringing awareness to the men, or by probably providing the necessary things to make sure that it is applied right. So the problem is not with the ruling, the problem is with the people abusing and misusing that privilege or that ruling. All right. So this is extremely important that we don't change or take away the ruling. But someone might say, well, wait a minute. How come Umar ibn al-Khattab during Amr Ramada, when there was a famine, what Umar ibn al-Khattab had done was literally stop doing criminal punishment for those that had committed the crimes of stealing. All right. And the reason to it is because he said, well, people are actually fighting, or at least they're stealing for food and survival. So he basically stopped the application of criminal law in that situation because of people are stealing for food. So in that situation, that is not obstructing the ruling. He definitely did not want to obstruct the ruling, but he understood what the ruling was actually ruled for, the reason behind the ruling. And when people's lives were right now at stake, we're talking about people's survival. They're trying to protect their nafs, trying to steal for food for their children, etc. So in that situation, if the person was stealing for food, for survival, then for those instances, we're going to not necessarily apply the rules and the laws of criminal law in terms of at least stealing. So in that situation, Umar did not obstruct the ruling, but he related to the reason that it was ruled for. In other words, this is called fiqh. Al-fiqh is having a deep understanding for the laws, not a surface understanding. Okay, so فإن خفتم ألا تعدلوا فواحدة. We talked a lot about that. وآتوا النساء صدقاتهن نحلة. What is وآتوا النساء صدقاتهن نحلة? آتوا النساء means give women. الصدقات, this is not talking about somebody opening a donation for his wife and trying to somehow make a time for donation for the wife. This has nothing to do with giving donations. It's not sadaqah, but this is actually talking about the mahr. This is talking about the mahr. So in terms of the mahr, it is actually obligatory to pay the mahr and pay mahr for the wife. Okay, it's obligatory to pay mahr for the wife. I just, opening the book, and I forgot to actually mention a number of different things. Let me go back to this one. فإن خفتم ألا تقسطوا في اليتامى. So when you're looking at اليتامى, now a number of things that I'm going through Tafseer al-Qurtubi, and there were a number of different topics that were actually mentioned in that regards. Number one is, so if you actually here, you look at فانكحوا وإن خفتم ألا تقسطوا في اليتامى فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء. So number one is that, can the wasi or the wali, who's not a mahram to this orphan, okay? So he's not a mahram to the orphan. Let me do this. Okay, now we know that the main reason why polygamy was permitted in Islam was really in order to make sure that men are not abusing those girls that are under their guardianship and getting married to them without considering their rights. In other words, they would say, well, you know what, I'm taking care of you, so might as well just marry you. What does he do? He basically starts abusing his position as a slash wali and says, okay, I'll act as the wali and I'll actually marry you, and voila, we're all set. So here's number one. For Zufar and the Shafi'i, they actually considered that the person cannot actually get married. Now, who's Zufar? Zufar is basically one of the scholars of the Madhab Hanafi. That the person that is in a state of wali for that girl as a guardian, even if he were to be the guardian, and let's just assume he wanted to give her mahr, he can't act as the wali and as the person to be, let's call it like on the other side of the marriage contract. So he can't be taking two positions at a time. So he can't be the groom and the wali at the same time and say, well, she's consenting, I'm all done. No. In that situation, we would have to have either, let's say, the Islamic Center, or we're talking about the Qadi, etc., to oversee that this really fits for the girl's benefit. All right. So we're having another party that's overseeing this situation and acting as the wali, and that man is going to step down at that moment from being the wali to being the groom. We're going to oversee whether you really are fit and going to make sure that the girl is really consenting, which is really interesting. I absolutely love that. I mean, Zufar al-Shafi'i paid attention to this one. I thought it was really interesting to actually see that they paid attention to this point. Now, one thing is that, of course, you will see a lot of people abusing. There are some scholars that said, well, you know, if he's basically doing it, and therefore we don't necessarily have to have a second wali. He can be the wali. There's nothing objecting that he can be the wali and the groom at the same time. But it was really worth mentioning about the Zufar and the Shafi'i opinion and their deep fiqh, because we need to make sure that this wali, who's actually acting as the educator, the person in responsibility, etc., and probably even manipulating the girl, that he is just the right person for her, and abusing that she's basically probably maybe not experienced, and who knows, maybe she doesn't even have the knowledge about the world, and etc., and then get put into some form of abuse without her knowing. It's really sad a lot of times. You know, today a young girl called me. This needs water. Today. Right. Today a young girl called me and she said, oh, well, she's 17 years old. Is that young, you guys? Oh, yeah. It is. Okay, just making sure. So, okay, I'm just making sure, but wallahi al-azim, I got lost with age. Sister Maimuna, is that young? Is 43 young? Right? Is it? Nowadays, that's a baby. That's a baby. 43 is a baby. Okay, yeah, I'll take that. All right. Now, what was I saying? Yes. So this girl calls me from New York, and she says, I was standing in this place, and this, I guess, she was at the cash register, and the guy starts asking, who's apparently Muslim, how old she was, and just different personal questions, okay, and where she lives and all these different things. And then she said, well, I said, so what did you answer the questions? And she said, I did answer the questions. I said, why did you answer the questions? And she said, well, I'm shy to not answer the questions. And this actually happens very frequently, is that girls are shy to, one, recognize which questions to answer. And many times they're oftentimes, I would say, concerned about other people's feelings. They don't want to hurt their feelings. And then you would have different perpetrators really abusing these girls' shyness or abusing their consideration for other people's feelings. So I basically was just giving her a piece of things like, okay, how do I know whether this information is supposed to be private or not? Because you want to keep in mind, the more you expose yourself, the more vulnerable you become. The more you expose yourself, the more other people will recognize your areas of weaknesses, and that's how they become your next and following abusers. So you got to be awake with that. And that's why in Islam, let's look at the DNAIM rule. Okay, let's look at the DNAIM rule. Number one, your deen, your sins. Don't expose your sins. That's between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, don't even expose if someone, unless you needed help. Okay, if you needed help, you were abused, who knows, you're going through some wrong thing, you needed help, you seek help. Okay, that's a different story. But generally speaking, don't ventilate and go in some sort of trying that catharsis to constantly just talk about the abusers. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was teaching us that, you know what, don't even complain about your abusers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, well, teaching us, complain about your sins, because when you fall into different things, that actually makes you somehow, it's really as a result of some things that you had committed. Well, not all the time. Sometimes there are people that are being abused, has nothing to do with a sin that they had committed. Okay, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was teaching us to look at it from a different angle. So don't complain about others, but complain about yourself. Ya Allah, give me maghfirah. Ya Allah, forgive my sins. Ya Allah, you're complaining out. That's why even Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, فَقُلْتُ اسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّكُمْ إِنَّهُ كَانَ غَفَّارًا يرسل السماء عليكم مدرارا ويمددكم بأموال وبنين ويجعل لكم جنات ويجعل لكم أنهارا ما لكم لا ترجون لله وقارا. If you look at how Surah Nuh, he would basically tell them, فقلت استغفروا ربكم, and I told them, do istighfar, إنه كان غفارا, he's the one that forgives. So what will happen if we do istighfar? He said, يرسل السماء عليكم مدرارا, he'll send the skies, in other words, the rain, the produce, etc. يرسل السماء عليكم مدرارا, and he will give you أموال وبنين ويجعل لكم جنات, and he'll give you جنات, and he'll give you the springs, etc. And ما لكم لا ترجون الله وقارا. Why are you not taking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as your place of fear? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is redirecting us. They're going back to the answer in the girl's question. So number one, we're looking at the deen part. Number two, after the deen part, we're looking at, so don't expose your deen even to people. Don't expose your deen. We're talking about sins here. Sins.
Not the belief.
Not the belief. The belief you have to. The belief you have to. We're talking about don't expose your sins. Number two, this is, of course, this is private. Number two, don't expose things that relate to your own nafs, whether we're talking about, certain details about you. Don't make it exposed to people. Okay? About your nafs, about different things that relate to you, your weaknesses, your challenges. Because the more you expose your challenges, the easier people will recognize your weaknesses, and you become more vulnerable. Why would you want more and more people to figure out where your holes are in your own nafs and use those to enter and abuse you? In other words, you're attracting more abusers. You're making a bigger victim of yourself. Number three is the part that relates to al-aql. What is al-aql in terms of what is making you depressed? What's causing your anxiety? Don't go sharing it. إنما أشكو بثي وحزني إلى الله. Complain it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they'll tell you, well, by talking about it, you're actually feeling better. In Islam, no. You're bringing it back into your mind. In Islam, it tells you that in order to heal it, you want to complain it, talk about it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Literally talk about it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to another human being. You talk about it to another human being, you never know who that human being is. I don't care if she's a therapist, she's a human being at the end of the day. Don't fool yourself.
You talk about to Allah.
You talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّمَا أَشْكُو بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. Complain only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So even therapy is not good here.
What?
Therapy is not good here.
I'm not saying therapy is not good. Walaikum salam, Noura. Why are you interrupting? Go ahead, Noura.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Noura.
Oh,
Go ahead.
So I just wondered, there's a lot of people becoming Muslim here, and I wondered about like them kind of like telling their story, or how is that with their previous sins and stuff?
Fair enough. I love that question. So if by telling the story, if that is going to be attracting people, with the intention, if that's going to be attracting people to recognizing that, hey, I've tried your path, and that path had led me to recognizing that it was a murky path, it was a wrong path. So sometimes when a person is exposing for the sake of guiding people, that's totally different. Okay, that's totally different. And this has to be put within the context. So you're not exposing yourself just, oh, well, I used to do this and I used to do that. And even if you had become Muslim, limit what you expose even about your past. Make it a personal thing between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because here's one thing, Noura, that sometimes people that might know your past, not everyone, pay attention to this, not everyone recognizes that when you had embraced Islam, that you had become an entirely different person. Some people might actually somehow bring it up and consider that, well, you've done this. Remember when you did this? So you don't want people abusing their knowledge about your past, even if you had converted. You don't want to expose yourself. It's a secret between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even when you want to do it for the sake of guidance, you want to give da'wah, I would say limit it to what is necessary, because if you were to go in detail, especially if we're talking about probably family, husband, etc., that they might misunderstand what you're saying, and they might later bring it up into your life and basically try to say that you cannot be trusted because you have this history of drinking, or you have this history that you abused drugs, or you have this history that you were one time homeless, etc. So some people might not understand that you were trying to expose for the sake of da'wah, and they might actually abuse you with it. So I would really be careful on what information I would give. And أحبب حبيبك هونا ما عسى أن يكون بغيضك يوما ما. When you love somebody, love them in moderation, because they can become your enemy one day. This is a hadith, you guys. And when you hate somebody, or when you despise somebody, you consider somebody as an enemy, whatever you want to, we're at the end of the day human beings. Make it in moderation, because you never know, your heart might change and you can become friends again. So you want to be really careful of how much information you expose about yourself, even if you were to do it for the sake of Islam. Let's go for the other part. Sorry.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry. I'll tell them, inshallah.
Rabbi وإياكم. So the other thing is, we talked about exposing when we're talking about depression, mental health, etc. And number 4, which is chastity/family. So whether we're talking about sins that relate to chastity, or whether we're talking about family. So when we're talking about family, what happens within the family, whether it's mom and dad getting into a fight, brother and sister, sometimes at each other's throats, etc. Don't expose that. Don't expose that to the public, and don't say, well, this person is my friend, I trust her, etc. Because you want to keep in mind, at the end of the day, your family, your mother and father, your brothers and sisters, they're going to be one day still considered as the ones to support you. Even if you were to say, well, no, I've actually known the reality of my brother or sister. I'm never going to need them ever in my life. These people are nothing but evil, etc. Never want to do that. You want to make sure that you recognize that to the public, keep this one in mind, to the public, your family, even if you may be in dispute with them, to the public, they may actually see it as some sort of enhancement to you, as a support to you. In other words, when to the public that she's got family, she's got a backup, etc. Sometimes it's important to keep this image, not for the sake of necessarily, yeah, I just want to keep an image, just an image and a lie about it. It's not lying about it. It's basically to preserve your honor, that you've got a backup, you've got support, etc. Don't expose your family, don't expose your father, don't expose your mother, don't expose your siblings' sins, etc. That's something that you want to work on privately. Don't expose them, because other people might take advantage of you and consider you to be more vulnerable. So teach your children, what happens at home stays at home. Mom and dad got into an argument, keep it quiet. Learn how to zip it, because the more you expose about yourself and about your family, it becomes exactly as if you had opened your door to the street. Who on earth would do that? Before you sleep, and even during awake, you're always worried and constantly closing the door. If you're constantly closing the door from people to physically entering, why would you keep your door open and expose your family for other intruders? Once the family business becomes public business, then in that situation, you yourself had just made your information, your home, become a place for other people to expand the problem. And they will oftentimes become the ones to chew on your information, to chew on your ird, on your chastity. So learn how to keep such things private. The final one is the fifth one, which is wealth. How much money you're making is private. How much money you're spending is private. How much money you're donating is private. How much money you're making and your husband is making, and all of those, are you guys a joint account or are you a personal account? Do you have separate bank accounts, etc.? All these different things are private, are totally private. How much your home costs, the rent, etc. And of course, I can find out just by knowing the rent, just by knowing how much you're paying for a car, how much you're paying for utilities, etc. I can get a rough estimate of how much money is coming in just by looking at those numbers. Those numbers, keep it private. Why should I keep it private? Because once you keep it private, then you will guarantee those that have an interest in your money will not have the data to find out where, how much, or even whether you have it or not. And those that might have an interest in you or your money will keep distance. Simple. Whenever anybody wants to come into your information, they basically want this information, your money, your income, etc. By giving this information, you're exposing yourself. And for those that want that piece of you, you had just opened the door to them. You had just opened the door to them. You gave them free/easy access to getting information and actually know your worth, what money is there, and probably even when, I'll tell you, when working in business, the last thing you want the person that you do business with is to know that you have money. Take it from me.
Somali culture. We meet 5 minutes. How much do you make?
Nope. This is why you're seeing a lot of drama within the families, the cultures that have a lot exposed about themselves. That's why you will see more drama in them. Pakistani culture, Syrian culture, the Somali culture. This is very common in their cultures. Very common. Pakistani, Syrian, this is really common. I don't know much about African, but I know this about Pakistani, and I know Syrian, and I know Somali. They would expose this. In Palestinian culture, such information, it's completely aib to ask about this information. And that's why it actually makes a lot of our lives easier in terms of money. It's aib to ask.
Because for my culture,
Change the subject. Learn how to get yourself out of.
How much does this make? How much?
Listen, no, change the subject. They'll learn. This is how you would teach them. Either change the subject or say, sorry, this is private information. If somebody has the audacity to trespass their boundary, why are you afraid to have the courage to say, excuse me, how did you get into this boundary?
I did not even know it's a boundary, so we're gonna
or to probably change the subject so the person in front of you knows I changed the subject because I don't want to answer the question. Thank you very much.
There's no changing. This is private boundaries.
That you can teach them. At the end of the day is that this is extremely important. And here's one thing, like I said, the more, when I used to work in business, we would look at the person and their attire many times. It's really, the business that I was engaged in was really in selling really expensive antiquities. We're talking about, a piece can be $5, $10, $50, and $60 and $100,000. All right, a piece. All right. Now, one thing is that many times, of course, there isn't a specific label on the price, but by looking at the person, we would know that the person can or cannot afford and what they can afford by looking at their clothes, by looking at their core, by looking at the business card. What's written on the business card? Are they a doctor, an engineer? What do they do? You could actually then bid a price. So the last thing to do, yes, this, they would call it business. That's why I quit the business. I couldn't handle it. I considered it some form of scamming. I couldn't handle it. But at the end of the day is that, just to tell you, many times you will basically attract scammers. I wasn't a scammer, okay? You will attract scammers by exposing the information about yourself. Don't attract scammers without you knowing, all right? And I know that some people would think, well, by exposing these numbers or exaggerating the numbers, I'll probably elevate my social status. I know that some people actually use it in order to get some form of privileges. And this is actually haram. This is a sign of hypocrisy. Al-mutashabbi' bima lam yu'ta. The Prophet ﷺ called it that person that would put on an attire with what they really are not. It's a form of hypocrisy.
What did that person do?
So they would probably fake their lining. There you go. That's a word. Fake their lining or exaggerate maybe the money that they really are making, just so that they can manipulate the masses, that they're basically high in their social / financial status. What was that?
Fake designer.
Oh, fake designer. There you go. Absolutely. In fact, that's why the Prophet ﷺ called them. It's like they're they're infatuating. Well, no, it's not infatuating, but they're exaggerating the reality of what they are in order to somehow gain some privileges, gain some publicity, and somehow attract people to make himself or herself seem as if they really deserve that. And this is right now, this is really common. This is really common. It's a very common thing.
Yeah, social media made it worse.
Social media made it worse. You'll have people that might actually call themselves, Sheikha, even though she just took a class of Tajweed, right? Yeah, 2-year program class of Tajweed, or probably doctorate such and such, when in reality they didn't even have that degree, but it's a way of marketing, and the list goes on and on. And
Go on vacation, take 50 pictures, stay for 2 years. Yeah,
what?
I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay.
I have a question.
Yep.
What if, so Jazakallah khair for this, because in the retreat you taught us about not sharing with all our friends, we look at each other, we're like, from today we can share anymore, I guess so.
Mhm.
And just today you're talking about the Malun, Alhamdulillah. I have a question though.
Mhm.
What if the person, now I'm talking about good suhbah. I'm not talking about, like, I'm talking, these are the people that I meet them in the masjid or my teacher. What if in life, because you go through different stuff and you learn different things and you react different things and the nafs is struggling with different things. What if you, like, let's say I get into a disagreement with, for example, my friend, and I want to know if I'm the one on the wrong or her, kind of like shura. I won't expose the person, but I need to talk to a person to filter my thoughts, because sometimes I am wrong and I don't know where exactly I'm wrong. And I'm trying to figure out who's on the haq. Am I on the haq? Am I wrong? Where am I doing this wrong? Sometimes
So,
you need that advice.
I think I
What is
understand
that?
your question, Zamzam. Let me tell you one thing. Humans are humans. So whether you're seeking, and you know that this person is my teacher, or those are students with me, they take the class, etc. Whether you're coming to ask me, another teacher, stay as anonymous as you can.
Yes.
The end of the day,
Yes.
you cannot necessarily consider that, okay, well, I trust that person, I trust everybody. And this is actually very common with women. They think if I'm interacting with a person, they give me a smile, that this person is going to be a nice person. We've got a relationship. You see, this is very common. Men and women in this one, maybe through experience, I don't really know why, would be really interesting to see a neuroscientist or even in psychology, what they would tell us about the difference between a man's brain and a woman's brain in that regard. But it's very common that as women, we usually interact with our social relations and we take that social relation as the path in where we figure out, let's call it our practical dynamics. Okay, so we're so social that many times we confuse knowing a person and having some social interaction in between conducting business with them. And I don't mean by conducting business an actual trade, business trade. What I mean by conducting business, I mean by that in probably getting married to them, probably doing something where you're testing their principle. Those are two different things. You joining in class with us, well, everybody here is going to be listening to the class, and of course they're going to be tentative about the class. But in order to judge a person, that's why Umar ibn al-Khattab was teaching when the man actually said, yeah, I know this person. This person's actually what? Oh, this person, I endorse this person. He said, well, did you do business with him? Did you travel with him? This is really important. In order for you to judge a person, you must have interacted with them to the point where you had tested their integrity. Did you live with the person? Did you do business with them? Did you travel with them? If not, then you didn't really test their integrity. To test a person's integrity, that actually means you conducted a practical testing to see whether this person really is living the principle, aware of the principle, and committed to the principle. To be committed to the principle, is totally different than talking about the principle. Talking about the principle is cheap talk, girl. It's cheap talk.
You have to give up.
There you go. To be committed actually means you got to give up, probably on a privilege, because to you, being committed to the principle is more important than a worldly privilege. And this is something that you would more see, which is in a wali. A wali would say, well, wait a minute. Before you tell me this guy is a good guy, the girls, they would come to me. The guy is charming and I want to get married to him. And I went to the masjid and the masjid told me that he prays in the masjid. I said, that's not an endorsement. Of course, the imam is going to see him in the masjid. That's not an endorsement. An endorsement to pray, that's cheap way of doing and showing your commitment. The real application of religiosity is when you're getting certain privileges or you're going through certain challenges and you're applying it there. This is the real way. So the masjid and the imam saying, yeah, I see him coming to salah, etc. That's an easy one. That's too easy. That's too easy. The real commitment is when you've got maybe $70,000. How honest and trustworthy are you going to be with that money? Are you going to give it? Are you going to somehow manipulate some kind of a game in order to somehow deduct something for yourself? Now that's really showing whether the person deserves endorsement or not.
That's scary.
That's scary.
Yeah.
That's why when girls, they would say, well, the guy is a great dean, he's charming, etc. They said, my dear, in marriage, the joking moments can sometimes be a scary thing. And pay attention to this one. A lot of times they would say, well, he's constantly joking, he's constantly charming. That's not an evidence that the person can necessarily take a responsibility. It's very common. These charming guys are the most to be careless. Allah.
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Where was I?
The charming guy.
The charming guys. So many times the girls would say, well, he's charming, etc., but then doesn't recognize that charming and making jokes is not an endorsement necessarily, because somebody can be charming, a nice personality, but can't even take a responsibility, not even for one day. That doesn't make an endorsement. And that's why the wali is there to say, well, wait a minute. Yeah, bring them to me. How much money are you making? And how do you spend your money? How much is your rent? That's when exposing
Is needed.
is needed. Of course, now we're going to expose. Why? Well, right now we're going to expose because now I'm judging you. You see what I'm saying? That's why the wali would say, the first thing, my dad would ask, how much is he making? What is he working? Etc. He'll go to business. Be like, because when in reality that happens, where does he work? Because they recognize, ladies, many times we think money is not an issue. Money and money and money is the most important catch. It's the most important catch. You want to catch a man? You want to test a man's integrity and his religiosity? Not in the masjid. Yes, it's important to come to the masjid, but you want to test them for real? Check out their money. How are they spending it? How are they doing the money management? Where are they getting the money from? That's when commitment really appears in and is exposed. Sister Maimuna, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, you answered already. You said that,
Yeah. Yeah,
because sometimes we see somebody, we said, okay, they want our daughters, we see them, we think that they're charming and all that. So we have to test, how can we do now? We have to, or like, how can we test them?
So the best way to test them is really to ask about them. Okay, so it's not like, yeah, here's $50,000 and I'm going to see him come back to me in a week and I'm going to see whether they're going to give it back to me. He might be the next person to get scammed. Why would you do that? Okay, so you don't test somebody like that and then put yourself to be on the trigger. Makes no sense. So ask about them with people or through the people that have actually dealt with them in that manner. All right. And in other words, how long has he kept a job for? 5, 6 months? How many throughout the past 3 years? How many jobs did he change? Because a person that keeps changing a job is really concerning, that they don't know how to show an investment. And what we're seeing right now, especially in the younger generation, I didn't feel myself. I wanted something that, and they're having this imagination of, I don't know what they're looking for. They don't even know what they're looking for. And they're thinking that they're going to be the superheroes to change the world. It's like, well, it takes a lot more than one particular job to change the world. You're not going to be Bill Gates. And certainly you're not going to be any of those millionaire guys. And well, maybe even if you are, at the end of the day, hey, how committed are you? It's not only the money that I'm concerned about, but are you committed in your school? It's not enough. Are you committed in your work? It's also not enough. Are you committed with your principal? Let's ask the friends and see. That's why a wali is really important. A wali is important. That's why it's really strange whenever as women, we go into a place, right away we're willing to make a conversation and we start getting social. Right away. 5 minutes. Guys, on the other hand, are different. They come in and they're all silent. And if they talk, limited talk, because they recognize that the more information and the more you talk, the way that you will actually pave for others to trespass your boundary. So they don't talk. They don't talk much. Yep, they don't talk much. They stay quiet. And by the way, even when they get and interact with each other, when they sit together, not only do they limit the talk, it's usually about money, business, all right? Usually about certain practical things, all right? Barely talk about their personal life. They barely talk about their personal life. It's usually talking about business and all the different things and what is out there, trying to figure out what's out there, etc. The other thing is that even when they deal with one another, each one is skeptic about the other. It's really strange. In contrast to women, when they deal with one another, each one is trusting the other. Each one is trusting the other, and she considers that, yeah, and she'll tell her all her information about the last argument between her and her husband, and how her husband was always doing this and this, and how her husband that, and her kids and all the struggles, and in one day, and she becomes the person to expose everything from the first day. And then they start complaining of how other people are intruding in their business. Well, you expose yourself. What do you mean how others are intruding into their business? That's why women live more in drama than men. Women live more in drama than men. Men's drama is, although on at a bigger scale, can actually cost lives. But women's dramas, there's so much of, it's kind of like, you stirring. The more you stir, the less relaxed you become. Think of it. Those glass, those glass, they're kind of like balls. They're the crystal balls, they're clear, and there would be snow inside. You shake it and it's either glitter falling and all of that. That's the same thing. The more you shake it, all right, the longer it takes for those glittery things to settle down. You want to settle down, let it relax, and don't shake it. By shaking it, you're not making it relax faster. In fact, you're actually delaying it even more and more. Learn how to calm yourself and not be impulsive, and don't expose yourself and share your private information. The second you share your private information, that same second you make yourself even more vulnerable and attracting more intruders, more perpetrators, and making yourself a bigger victim. We'll continue, inshallah. Sorry, I know we didn't get to the tafsir yet. No, it is supposed to be tafsir. I know, but they actually got me into this.
How much that was the most important thing in my life.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. والفجر وليال عشر والشفع والوتر والليل إذا يسر هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بعاد إرم ذات العماد التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد وثمود الذين جابوا الصخر بالواد وفرعون ذي الأوتاد الذين طغوا في البلاد فأكثروا فيها الفساد فصب عليهم ربك سوط عذاب إن ربك لبالمرصاد
فأما إذا ما ابتلاه ربه فأكرمه ونعمه فأما الإنسان فأما الإنسان إذا ما ابتلاه ربه فأكرمه ونعمه فيقول ربي أكرمن وأما إذا ما ابتلاه فقدر عليه رزقه فيقول ربي أهانن. الله أكبر. الله لمن حمده. الله 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 أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. كلا بل لا تكرمون اليتيم ولا تحاضون على طعام المسكين وتأكلون التراث أكلا لما وتحبون المال حبا جما كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا وجاء ربك والملك صفا صفا وجيء يومئذ بجهنم يومئذ يتذكر الإنسان وأنى له الذكرى يقول يا ليتني قدمت لحياتي فيومئذ لا يعذب عذابه أحد ولا يوثق وثاقه أحد. يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. الله أكبر. الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله الله أكبر الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله الله أكبر الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله
This is supposed to be private information. This is supposed to be private information. What time class finishes? Private information.
Okay.
When it starts, private information.
You don't have to actually have this thing in our house. Dr. Aisha said it. It's so easy. I thought, this is private information. Dr.
Private
Aisha said
information.
it.
My family calls me Wazarat al-Awqaf, which means the ministry of Awqaf.
Awqaf is the one in-
Awqaf is basically the religious ministry, like an Islamic ministry. And
That's a good one though.
it's Wazarat al-Awqaf.
Good. Listen,
The
right?
Mufti said.
Yeah, the Mufti said.
There were actually a number of different topics that I wanted to talk about, but I think I got carried away.
But I think this was very important because I did not personally know all of it. So alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. But there is actually an important topic that I wanted to talk about, which is تزويج الصغيرة. Basically getting married to an underage. Is getting married to an underage permissible in Islam? And what do we mean by underage? So underage actually means a girl that has not reached the age of puberty. All right. This is a very important topic, especially that, you know, the West has been many times taking this topic and basically taking it as something that Islam actually permits. So I want you to look at this word right here. وإن خفتم ألا تقسطوا في اليتامى فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء. I want you to look at this. So is reaching the age of puberty something that or not reaching the age of puberty, does that mean that the girl cannot marry until she reaches the age of puberty? What if she said, but I want to, and I'm going to give consent? A number of different things to say here. So the Hanafi madhab, looking at this ayah, they said, well, the ayah says, and if you fear that you cannot be just to the orphans, that is the orphan girls, then marry from the women, so and so and so. Now, so the Hanafi madhab, they said, well, look, a girl that is a yatima is going to be a girl, or is by definition, is a girl that did not reach the age of puberty. Okay. So the Hanafi madhab, they said, look, it says, well, if you can't be just to the orphans, fankihu, in other words, it's also saying, well, you could also marry the orphan girls / they're underage. The majority of the scholars, they actually said, absolutely not. The majority of the scholars, they said, look, the ayah said, fankihu ma taba lakum minan nisa. And they said, an-nisa, it says, and marry the women. And a woman would not be a woman until she reaches the age of puberty. Yet, even the Hanafi madhab, when they said marriage to the underage, they were not talking about intimacy involved. They were just talking about the marriage contract. In other words, we're not talking about consummating the marriage. We're just talking about the marriage contract alone. Okay. The marriage contract alone, the Hanafis, they regarded that that's permissible for an underage. If we look at the wali, we look at the consent, we look at all these different things. Okay. They considered it permissible, but for the majority of scholars, Maliki, Hanbali, and Shafi'i, and even others, they said no, because the ayah says, فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ, and therefore what is permissible to get married to is only a grown woman physically, and certainly that's going to be reflecting that she is right now capable of consummating the marriage, 1. 2, is capable of making her decisions that she is taking, and we're regarding her that she's mentally mature to make the decisions, even if we're talking about a marriage contract. So we are not just talking about a marriage contract, but we're also talking about
Decision.
physical. Well, marriage contract, we're talking about, we're talking about 2 things. Yes, because when we talk about a marriage contract, then we're assuming when we take a consent from her that she is aware of what she's giving, right? So for the Hanafis, they would say, well, that's okay. I mean, she doesn't have to be fully grown. She can be underage. For the majority, they said that's not right. Majority, they said no. She has to be physically grown, and also that is the way to know that she has matured mentally. Okay, so the other thing is that in Islam, to be a person that is considered held accountable by reaching the age of puberty.
Yes.
This one's clear. So if we're talking about a girl, she started getting her period at 11, she can actually get married at the age of 11, 13, 14, whatever it is. Now, what if she didn't actually get a period and she's already 15? Can that happen? That can happen. That can happen. Can she get married or not? Is she held accountable? Does she have to wear hijab or not? Etc. Now, when we look at puberty in Islam, there are different age stages to puberty. It's not one stage. So it's not once she gets her period or once the boy starts getting wet dreams. There are different stages to puberty. So we're talking about hair, we're talking about growing glands, changes that we would see on basically on the anatomy, the physical changes, etc. Those are the different changes to show that the person has already started their stages of puberty. Okay, so once those stages do start, that's when we would say she's right now held accountable or he's right now held accountable once the changes. So for boys, maybe more hair, voice changes, jaw bones start changing, right? And you've got with the voice, of course, larynx and all these different things changing, etc. All right, so that would actually reveal things. For the girls, of course, when we're talking about breast tissue, we're talking about changes in the waist, we're talking about, we could see mood swings, etc. That's basically the start, or at least the stages and a sign of the stages of puberty actually coming on surface. Now, this is important to talk about. I thought it would be good to bring it up, but of course, when we talk about the part about can an underage girl in Islam actually have a marriage consummated to mean that the man could be married to her and can actually be intimate with her if she's underage, the answer is no.
Haram.
No scholar ever said that it is permissible for an underage to mean that she is not yet built, physically grown to actually be intimate. And we would basically know that by even the OB studies to tell us the impact it has on girls. As for the age of 18 and saying that, well, we need to, elevate the age of marriage until 18, this is ma anzalallahu bihi min sultan. This is not whatsoever supported by not the Quran and not the Sunnah. In fact, we even see restricting the age to a certain age and the result it has on the Western communities, and that they basically manage to get to their shahwa, to their lust in haram ways. So what did they do? They basically obstructed the halal way, and then they ended up giving more spaces. They were so rigid in considering an age limit or an age number, thinking that the girls, this will give them an opportunity to get an education, etc. But then what they ended up is really having more girls get pregnant outside of marriage, and more girls ended up actually being a single parent. So then they had to open up another door, which is the door of abortion. And the list of different contraceptives and so forth. So they thought, we still want to limit the age. So they started opening other doors of haram in order to say, but this is giving women more opportunities. And of course, a lot of this is marketed through narrative and emotional talks and rhetorics and all these different things in order to say, see, we're just trying to be caring about women and give them the opportunity to educate, the opportunity, etc. When in reality, what they had really done is really letting more women become victims to their own selves. And we talked about the patriarchal part. وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلَةً. آتُوا النِّسَاء, give women. الْإِيتَاء is a word to mean to give with nothing in return. So wait a minute. So why is she given the mahr anyways? And this is called sadaqah. this is not the sadaqah to mean an actual sadaqah donation, but this is in order to indicate that this is not a price for the woman. This is not a price, but this is a nihla. This is a sadaqah, this is a nihla, this is a gift to be given to the woman and is not whatsoever of any payment or a price for the woman. The word nihla, nihla, not nahla or nuhla, nuhla or nihla, both. So what does the word nihla actually mean? The word nihla, number one, first meaning is that nihla to mean as a gift. The second meaning to mean as a religion or a religious commitment. And that's why even Ibn Hazm, one of my favorite scholars, he actually wrote a book. It's called Al-Fisal fil Milal wal Nihal. Al-Milal wal Nihal. His book is in almost 5-6 volumes, right? And he called it Al-Fisal. Al-Fisal to mean those areas that differ and make religions, the boundaries that assign different religions differently. Al-Milal wal Nihal. So Nihal here would actually be the religions. So what does religion have to do with this? آتوا النساء صدقاتهن نحلة, here to mean that give women their mahar as a religious commitment. It's a religious commitment. It's a commitment that you take seriously as your own religion. And mahar is actually obligatory. So what does that even mean when we say mahar is obligatory? So mahar is obligatory to mean that there must be mahar within the marriage. Okay? So what if there was no mahar assigned? Does the relationship become zina? No. There is al-mahr al-musamma and mahr al-mithal. What's the difference? Al-mahr al-musamma is the assigned mahr. If the mahr was not assigned, we would go for mahr al-mithal, which is the estimated / equivalent mahr of her likes. What does it mean of her likes? What does it mean? So for example, you're from Mali, was it? From Mali. So we would say, okay, the women, your cousins, your kingship, what is pretty much the average mahar for the girls in your country? Oh, she would say, well, it's this much, $20, $30. Then we would say, well, since it wasn't assigned, we're going to put as your mahar as there. But then she says, well, that's in Mali. You're not going to use their currency and apply it on me.
Yeah.
I'm actually in America. So in that situation, we would say, okay, which masjid do you go to? I go to Masjid al-Rahim. We're going to say, okay, Sheikh Abdullah, the average mahar within your masjid, what is the average? So you might want to go and start going to the masjid in Minnetonka. Right? You might want to change the mahar. Right? Change the masjid. Go to the masjid in Minnetonka. They're actually the rich people there. Right? Change the masjid. Or maybe go to the Masjid al-Falastiniya, the Palestinian masjid. Now those ask for big bucks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you want to go there. All right, we're going to use it that way. Or if, let's say, the girl is Somali, we're going to say, okay, within the area, within your community, how much is the mahar given there? Okay. Now, here's one thing. So this is mahr al-mithal. If no mahar or no amount was assigned, we would basically go for the equivalent mahar, but the mahar must be given. The mahar is a must. What if the mahar was assigned, but it was kept as a debt?
Yeah, because a lot of parents, they don't check their mahar, they just assign it.
So what if it was just considered as, well, this is a set, this is the amount, and then he never gave anything from it? Now, in that situation, this becomes a debt. If the man were to die, that would be deducted from the money of what he had inherited or what he had left behind. That would be deducted before even distributing the inheritance. Number one, that would be a debt. Now, the other thing is that once he has the money, then he is supposed to be paying the mahr. Once he has the money, he is supposed to be paying the mahr. In certain countries, especially the Levant, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Palestine, we have something called mitakhir and mitqaddim, delayed, or even upfront, okay? Or upfront mahr, or like a down payment. Now, most people think, and wrong to actually think this way, most people think that the delayed payment is only due when the man divorces or when he dies, which is actually not true. The mahr is due when the man has the money. He has to give her mahr, unless فإن طبن لكم عن شيء منه نفسا. What is طبنا? طبنا is the same word as طابة, the same root. طبنا is a verb where it is attached with nun niswa. In other words, if the women by free will, and the word taba is exactly like this one. She, just like when we had the man having the pleasure or the interest in marrying women, same thing here. If she had the pleasure, the free will, and was interested, and she said, well, take the money. That's okay. You're more important to me than anything. She said it wholeheartedly. Then in that situation, the ayah says, فَكُلُوهُ هَنِيئًا مَرِيئًا. Then take it. If she's telling you, take the money, then take it. فَكُلُوهُ هَنِيئًا مَرِيئًا. Just take it. Question. Hypothesis number one. What if she says later, yeah, I gave you the money, but I want it back. Some scholars, like Shuraih al-Qadi, says, well, you decided to give it up. A socket layout. You can't give a gift and then go and take it back. So when you want to make that decision, you gotta review it and stop going back on your decisions back and forth. Stop going back on your decisions. Too late. This is Shuraih al-Qadi. Just an idea about Shuraih al-Qadi.
Okay.
Shuraih al-Qadi was not a Sahabi, but he did actually become Muslim during the time in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Shuraih al-Qadi was from Yemen. Shuraih al-Qadi was attempting to go and see the Prophet ﷺ, but he died before him even getting there. He became Muslim 5 years before the Prophet ﷺ had died. Didn't make it to see the Prophet ﷺ. Shuraih al-Qadi, as his name, al-Qadi. He was very known for his wisdom, and in fact, even Umar ibn al-Khattab assigned him to be al-Qadi because he had the courage to say the truth, even if that was going to be against the Khalifa of Umar ibn al-Khattab himself. Now, but that's not necessarily what all scholars would agree on, because some scholars, they said, no, if she basically decides to leave and leave the opinion that she had mentioned before and decided that, no, yes, I did say I want to give it to you, but I'm actually going back on it and I don't want to give it to you anymore. In that situation, you had other scholars like Ibn al-Arabi that said, no, she can decide to void her previous opinion of giving him the money. Ibn al-Arabi is Maliki madhab. What's your evidence? He said, simple. The ayah says, tibna, to give something wholeheartedly. And when we say to give something wholeheartedly, that means if she went back on it, tibna is not applied.
That means she's not wholehearted.
She's not wholeheartedly. You see it?
No.
Yeah, but that's so
not-
literal.
Well, at the end of the day, this is our constitution. We have to take it literal.
Mine. I mean, what's
No, if she lost her mind, that's a different story. Then we would assign someone else to actually be the wali. But at the end of the day, is that if someone lost their mind, keep this one in mind. If someone had a mental disorder, then they cannot be the ones to rule on their financial situation.
They need a wali.
And even the wali cannot give up on certain things that require, no, we need her consent. Hold on, let me see. I don't know, Mr. Mark. No more. She's not answering. I'm trying. I don't know why my mom's calling. I don't know why she's calling. She usually, I tried to answer. What was that? She's in Palestine, but she would not actually call unless she wanted to tell me something about the class right now. All right. So فَإِن طِبْنَ لَكُمْ عَنْ شَيْءٍ مِّنْهُ نَفْسًا فَكُلُوهُ هَنِيئًا مَرِيئًا. So this is basically to tell you that there are these differences of opinions on can she go back or not. Hypothesis number 2. What if she says, listen, I'm going to give you part or all my mahr on a I'm telling you something wrong. I don't say Michael. Is that she's answering. Let's say she says, I'll give you all or part of my mahr on a condition that you don't marry someone else. No?
No.
Hypothesis number 2.
that's a
No,
blackmail.
that's a
That-
blackmail.
Wait a minute. She says, I'm going to give you part of my mahr.
That's not in the Quran and Sunnah.
Hold on. You'll see it even in the Maliki madhab. It's really interesting. The first opinion said, well, wait a minute. When it comes to such conditions in the marriage contract, there are differences of opinions on whether during a marriage or whether before a marriage, what kind of conditions can you put in a contract?
Okay.
Can the contract be something contradictory to a text that had permitted something? Opinion number 1, I'll just lay out the opinions. Opinion number 1 is that it is permissible. You let go of a privilege, mubah, something that is permissible, and you let go, and she consented that she would be in this marriage, or you consented to probably take a compensation to make a trade-off. And they said, it's permissible. Opinion number 1. Opinion number 2 said that's not permissible. Why? They said because the Prophet ﷺ said every condition that's not in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a void permissible, is a void condition. كل شرط ليس في كتاب الله فهو باطل. Clear hadith. They said, well, look, the hadith says every single condition that's not in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is void. Group 1 responded, no. The Prophet ﷺ is saying every condition that's not in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to mean contradictory to the actual legal maxims of that condition, not something that is permissible. They've got an answer. Group 3 said, wait a minute. If we are talking about the case where, here's opinion number 1, If we're talking about the case where she went into the marriage and then she said, I'll give half or full of my mahar on a condition that you don't get married. If we are to say that the marriage number 2 is void / invalid, that would actually make it zina. And we know that the condition for that second marriage, all the conditions are met. We've got the wali, we did a wedding, we've got the witnesses, we've got the mahar, but he just betrayed the first wife, took her mahar, and promised her not to remarry, and he remarried. First opinion said, well, he's at sin for not fulfilling the promise. But that doesn't mean the second marriage is invalid. It's a betrayal. And the Prophet ﷺ actually said, Al-mu'minuna 'inda shurutihim. The believers, they abide by the conditions that both parties had laid on themselves. Second opinion said, well, the condition itself is invalid from the start. Because she put a condition on something that no one has the right to restrict. Opinion number 3 said, no, what you can't, he agreed to let go of his privilege. And he actually took the compensation for it. So why are we right now going to say, well, he can get away with it? So they said, here's how we're going to fix the matter. We're going to say, yeah, you took the mahar. You're going to pay her back her mahar. She let go of that portion, or whether all the mahar, on a condition, and you let go of that condition. Pay her back her mahar. Compensate her and give her back all her mahar, because you had actually promised to take the mahar in exactly on a condition, and you didn't fulfill it. So we're going to tell you, give her back her mahar. That's the least that you could do. Plus, you're going to be held accountable for betraying the woman. You're going to be held accountable.
He can be sneaky about that, though.
So, I'm laying out, here's the thing. I'm laying out these opinions, okay? Because these are scholars. This is not me judging, okay? This is not me judging. So the first opinion, Ibn al-Qasim, just an idea, was actually Imam Malik's. He died 193, 90 Hijriya, something around there. Imam Malik died 179. He died 190 Hijriya. He was actually the personal student for 20 years for Imam Malik. 20 years. And in fact, he was considered, Ibn al-Qasim was actually considered the main figure to write al-Mudawwana al-Kubra, which basically has all the list of ahadith that Imam Malik had actually narrated, or at least recorded from the scholars that, or the Sahaba, sorry, not the Sahaba, but the Tabi'in that he had met. All right, so that was Ibn al-Qasim. The other one is actually the Ibn Abd al-Hakam. Ibn Abd al-Hakam was from Egypt, okay, also Maliki. I'm laying out some of the Malikis, okay, just to help you see what we're looking at when we're talking about this topic. So, I don't want to let you guys go before.
2 legal conditions before marriage, like if you marry, you have a right to marry, but if you marry, I can execute khulu.
I can execute you to what? You want to execute the guy?
Khulu.
You can execute the khulu?
Like my
Khulu.
khulu.
Okay.
Khulu, yes.
So
Before the marriage, though, if you have the right to get married, that's okay.
remember last
But
time
it
the
often-
boat. I see what you're saying. So there are 2 things here. Number 1, which is al-isma. Number 2 is al-khulu. Okay. Al-isma is that the man is agreeing that divorce, or you initiating a divorce, is in your hand. Il-khulu, on the other hand, is actually a bilateral agreement. So you would both together agree. But here's one thing. Il-khulu', listen to this. Il-khulu' actually means you are gonna give him the mahr that he had paid you in order to basically depart the marriage. Okay? That you would actually do that. Now, here's one thing. I don't recommend il-khulu', there's no doubt that you could actually do that. But I don't recommend getting yourself, remember that boat
Yeah.
story that I said? You're right there rowing your boat, and then you felt that he was going to get someone into the boat, and then you decided to jump off the boat.
Yeah.
That's the same thing. That's exactly the same thing, because to jump off the boat that you sailed this far and you still don't know whether the boat can handle these people or not, this many people or not, or these many people, better English.
You
All
try,
right.
but if it doesn't handle
I mean,
you,
exactly, that's what I'm saying. You try, you might say, well, I'm hurt emotionally, etc. I understand you're hurt emotionally, but you want to remember, decisions are not made based on emotions. I want you to relax, see how the situation is, and then once you actually see abuse happening or certain things flipping, that's when you're going to say, well, I'm making my decisions based on information, data, based on the consequences that I had seen, where they went wrong. We tried, this is what we had done to fix the problem. 1, 2, 3, we had distanced ourselves. We had tried telling him, each one is, don't talk about the other. Please, ladies, do not meet one another. Don't meet your co-wife, period. Stay away. You want to meet your co-wife? I mean, it's up to you, but I personally don't recommend it. Stay away and just feel that you've got your little independent place away without having someone else, somehow you doing some kind of a competitive relationship, and it becomes unhealthy, literally unhealthy. So in that situation, what I would say is that when you're looking at al-khulu', I would say I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing that, because khulu', it doesn't necessarily need a second marriage to be granted. You don't need anybody to grant you that. That's already available anyways.
but can you come back together after khulu'?
Yes, you can come back after khulu' many times. You can do khulu' and come back, do khulu' and come back, do khulu' and come back. Allah yahdiki ya Rab. Oh no, I'm ruining these marriages. No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. You know what? Let me tell you something about men that's different than women. Women, they could scar and come back to those that scarred them. Men are different. Men, to them, their izzat nafs is more important than anything. And I'm not talking just about Arabi men. Their izzat nafs, their pride is a big issue. So if you think I'm going to tell you that I am breaking this marriage and I'll come back later, etc. No, at one point, they'll just tell you bye-bye. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put that talaq in their hand, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows how He had made the man's mind and how He made his psychology. So don't think, oh, I'll just tell him bye-bye and then he'll want me back. And no, at one point he'll just tell you bye-bye, see you later, or maybe see you never.
But a woman too can feel like that. Right?
Oh, absolutely. A woman can feel that. A woman is more compromising. She can come back and come back and come back and come back many times.
Yes, the man don't.
Men don't.
Some.
Women, some, absolutely. I mean, that we see that all the time. We see that all the time. But women are more compromising than men. That's why they become an easy victim.
Yes.
They compromise more. It's like, okay, well, yeah. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you to have a wali. Why? Because walis are way less compromising than you. stubborn. That's why even the way mom and dad raise the kids, dad says no, that's final. Mom says no, she'll probably go back to it 5 minutes later, change her mind. So long on a rule that mom puts, she'll change 5 minutes later. All right, maybe we can talk about it. What does that make? A mom's rules usually will see a way to let her let go of her laws. But a man, no. And this is not an all to actually say this is, some kind of a misogynist thing. It's not a misogynist thing. This is for us to learn certain things. This is normally the realities of ourselves. Anyhow, I'm actually invited somewhere. So, inshallah, wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Inshallah, we'll answer questions next time because I don't want to be late. I promise the people. Inshallah. Wa iyyakum. And we'll see. Assalamu alaikum is not a good idea jumping off the boat. Exactly. Fatu is right there. She remembers that. All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone.
Yeah, but Friday she explained